everybody. Welcome to Mumford and Other Observations. We are T.S. Russell and Bridget Gamboni, and we are not in front of a fake fireplace, as we usually are. Instead, we're in a different room in my apartment in front of other bookshelves. So this is a new set that we wanted to try out and see how it worked, and I hope you all like it. I hope especially those of you listening to the audio version enjoy this new visual that we have for you. So just a little plug for you to hop on over to the YouTube channel to check out the video podcast if you haven't done that already.
Yes.
So, Bridget, are you excited to be doing Thistle and Weeds here?
Yes, very much excited to learn more about this song.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like it's a song you don't really have a good grasp of?
Indeed, yeah. It was one of those songs that I was never crazy about.
Yeah, same.
But I'm sure after learning more about it, I will appreciate it more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was one of those that before I went through and analyzed it line by line, I really couldn't have told you what the song was about, other than don't let your soul stagnate, but beyond that, I really had no idea. So it was really enlightening to go through this one and notice things that I hadn't noticed before. So I'm pretty excited to talk about it. So let's begin with reading the lyrics of the song. Bridget, take us away.
Thistle and weeds. Spare me your judgments and spare me your dreams, 'cause recently mine have been tearing my seams. I sit alone in this winter clarity which clouds my mind. Alone in the wind and the rain you left me. It's getting dark, darling, too dark to see. And I'm on my knees, and your faith in shreds it seems. Corrupted by the simple sniff of riches blown, I know you have felt much more love than you've shown. I'm on my knees, and the water creeps to my chest. But plant your hope with good seeds. Don't cover yourself with thistle and weeds. Rain down on me. Look over your hills and be still. The sky above us shoots to kill. Rain down on me. I will hold on hope. I begged you to hear me. There's more than flesh and bones. Let the dead bury the dead. They will come out in droves. But take the spade from my hand and fill in the holes you've made. Plant your hope with good seed. Don't cover yourself with thistle and weeds. Rain down on me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That was lovely. It's it's a really interesting song. It's a little bit longer than some of the other ones, definitely longer than Tim Shell or Sigh No More, or those ones. It's comparable to The Cave, I guess, in terms of the amount of lyrics in it. It goes on a little longer on the audio version, because that whole I will hold on hope bit gets repeated numerous times to frightening effect. And because this is the scary song on the album. Every album has one. You've got what is it, Broken Crown on Babel. I think Monster, probably.
Monster, for me, Snake Eyes.
Snake Eyes is kind of scary. The whole album's a little scary, honestly. It's hard to pick one over the rest of them. But yeah, Snake Eyes is kind of scary. And then Darkness Visible is probably the scariest Mumford and Sons songs ever. That's on Delta.
Spooky.
It is, yeah. It's literally about Satan falling to earth. It's great stuff. But this is the scary song on Sigh No More. I was surprised to find out what this song was really about, because, like I said earlier, there's that obvious theme of not letting your soul stagnate, right? And of planting your hope with good seeds. Don't cover yourself with thistle and weeds. That refrain is fairly straightforward. But a lot of the other lyrics are pretty cryptic. Like that line, corrupted by the simple sniff of riches blown. You're like, what does somebody loving money too much have to do with the rest of this song, right? So it was just really interesting to go through and see how it actually all does fit together and what this song is about. So basically what this song is about is it's an exhortation to somebody to not let your soul stagnate, obviously, but not to let your soul be corrupted by the love for things of this world, and to have a spiritual approach to life is basically what it comes down to. So when you look at the song through that lens, it all kind of ties together, including that line about the love of money, right? Because love for money is really kind of symbolic, ultimately, of love for anything worldly.
Mm-hmm.
Just the things of this world over the things of the spiritual world. And so I think it all does ultimately tie together pretty well. So let's go ahead and do the No Fear Mumford translation, the plain English prose version of these lyrics. So it goes more or less like this, and it's going to be a little long because, like I said, the lyrics are fairly long in this song. Stop sharing your negative and positive thoughts with me. I have enough to handle with my own thoughts. I feel so alone and my mind is so clouded. I'm alone because you left me alone in the storm of life, and now it's getting worse and worse. I'm begging you to improve, but you don't trust me anymore. You've been corrupted by the love of money, but I know you weren't always that way. I know that you used to love me once. I'm begging for help because I feel like I'll be drowning soon. Your best hope is to love good things instead of giving all your attention to empty worldly things. There is grace in that. Look over the hills and see how much worse the storm of life is becoming. One stroke of its lightning could kill us. Turn to the Lord and ask for his grace. But I won't give up hope for us. There's more to life than just the flesh. Man has a soul also. Stop being concerned with the things of this world. There are plenty of worldly people who can tend to worldly affairs. As for you, let me help you to fix the problems that you've caused for yourself. So that's the No Fear Mumford translation.
I wouldn't have pulled that out of that song just by listening to it. And I think you're right. You know what it says. I'm not saying it's not. Right.
You know,
it's just,
you don't think I made it up?
No.
That's a relief.
I wouldn't have realized that that's what it was about just by listening to it. So
right. Neither did I. It wasn't until I sat down and really paid attention to it, which just goes to show how worthwhile it is to do that sort of thing. It's one of the great benefits of doing this podcast is that I get to discover all of these things about this music that I love that I'd never realized before. So it's really just taking my relationship with Mumford and Sons to the next level, you might say. And it's a great thing. So encourage people to do that with other things that you love as well. Right? If you really want to understand something that you like, whether it's a poem or a song or a movie or anything like that, sit down, look at it in detail, write about it, try to figure it out. Like, give some actual time and attention to it, and it's super rewarding. I always tend to put that sort of thing off for myself, but when I do it, it's so refreshing and rewarding. Oh, let's mention some of the literary sources for this song. So the main source for the language of this song is the parables of Christ in the New Testament. But I think there might also be some allusions to East of Eden, which we've mentioned on several other songs, but then also to King Lear, which we've mentioned before, and the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, which was briefly mentioned in the Winter Winds episode, but we didn't find an actual connection. But here we just might have found that. So we'll introduce these different sources as they come up in the course of the analysis. So as far as the line-by-line analysis goes, a lot of what this song does is it sets up for the following song. So in terms of its place on the album, it's right before Awake My Soul, which is really kind of a spiritual high point for the whole album. And this song really sets up a lot of the themes for that particular song. Because, like I said earlier, it's that this song is basically an exhortation to turn away from worldly things so that you can prepare your soul to meet its maker, which is what Awake My Soul is all about. In terms of who the speaker is, it's a little bit hard to tell because part of it seems like it's more of an inner dialogue, but then he addresses the speaker as darling at one point, which is suggestive that it might be a man speaking to a woman, but it's kind of hard to tell. Basically what it is it's somebody speaking to a soul that is in danger of being lost to the world. I think that's the most important thing to realize here. But maybe we'll see more, maybe we'll get more insight about who the speaker is as we move through. So the first two lines here are, spare me your judgments and spare me your dreams, because recently mine have been tearing my seams. And then the last line of that first stanza is, I sit alone in this winter clarity which clouds my mind. So there's a lot going on in this first stanza here, these first three lines. A lot of different connections to other songs popped up when I was looking at this. Spare me your judgments and spare me your dreams. Basically saying to somebody, stop troubling me with all of your troubles, everything that's on your mind. I'm feeling so overwhelmed by everything that's in my mind, and I just can't handle it. That's what he means when he says, recently mine have been tearing my seams, right? My judgments and my dreams are, I'm coming apart at the seams here. And that language of tearing my seams reminded me of the song Lover of the Light, which is on Babel, where he says, stretch out my life and pick the seams out. So just similar language coming up there. I don't know if there's much of a connection between these two songs, but there's definitely that similar language going on. Also, that image of coming apart at the seams is reminiscent of I Gave You All, where he says, rip the earth in two with your mind, which we saw that a lot of the imagery and language in that song is taken from King Lear. Kind of seems like we might be back out on the heath with King Lear in this song, where we're just tormented by that storm, whether it's an external storm or a storm in our own minds, but seems to have something of a similar flavor to King Lear, that somebody's just really tormented in spirit here. The following line really elaborates on that. I sit alone in this winter clarity which clouds my mind. So you got some contradiction there in that song, in that line. Winter clarity, but the clarity clouds the mind, that's not how those two words are supposed to work, right? That idea of loneliness, we've talked about that before. It came up in Winter Winds and Roll Away Your Stone, Little Lion Man and Tim Shell. It'll come up again in After the Storm. There's this tension going on in this album between, is man alone or does man have help? Where does the ultimate responsibility lie? That sort of thing. And, what does it mean for hope if man does find himself ultimately alone, or if he doesn't? That whole thing. But he's definitely feeling alone here, right? That's because of the tearing apart at the seams that you mentioned in the previous line, that he's so overwhelmed by what's going on inside of him that he feels completely isolated, and his mind is clouded by this winter clarity for some reason. But that word winter, of course, references back to Winter Winds, which was really a song about somebody who needed to experience torment of spirit, but kept running from it and trying to distract himself with bad relationships and that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of correlation between these two songs because of that theme of that inner turmoil, but also the imagery of growth and winter and springtime and those oppositions that are going on. I think a lot of the language is pretty similar. And then also the mind, the word mind is mentioned again here, and that word is getting developing a very interesting connotations as the album progresses. Because in the cave, he was talking about his broken mind, right? And then in I Gave You All, he was ripping the earth in two with his mind. In Tim Shell, the water was freezing her already cold, cold mind. And now here, he sits alone in the winter clarity which clouds his mind. So there's really this whole, like, this image of the mind is being built up of a mind in torment. And it's not a fun place to be in. But all the connotations of those previous songs that have mentioned mind, they come up again here in this song. So that was the first stanza. Any observations before we move on to the next?
I guess I'm just thinking about the how there's two parts of the human person that are talked about a lot, the mind and the soul, in this album. This one seems to be focusing on the mind, but others speak more about the soul, thinking about Awake My Soul.
Yeah.
And so that's just an interesting... I wonder if he's using them in the same... I don't think he's using them in the same way.
You think there's a real distinction between the two in Mumford's cosmology of the person, I guess?
I think so. I haven't really formulated why, but that's the hunch that I have. I think I'm just thinking about Awake My Soul and about part of me's thinking about Sigh No More as well. And After the Storm, I think also speaks more of the soul. Yeah.
Well, so classically understood, the mind is that which is the place where the will resides, right? It's the reasoning faculties of the person. So it's the part of the person that makes decisions. But it's not ultimately... The soul is much closer to what the actual person is than the mind is. Ultimately, the heart is where the fullness of where all those things meet.
Yes, like the essence of the person.
But the soul, there's always been that dichotomy between the soul and the body, right? That dualistic understanding, which sometimes is taken to extremes and sometimes is more balanced. But in a very special way, the soul is kind of the closest that we come to the actual person. Man's not fully man without body and soul united, but there's something about the soul that is like, it really transcends the mere physical existence. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, like the soul precedes the mind.
Yeah, I think the soul is much more fundamental. I think the mind is kind of that place where the body and the soul kind of struggle against each other, perhaps, which would explain why we see so much imagery of the mind being broken and ripping the earth in two and clouded and that sort of thing, right? Because anytime that you have human beings, there's going to be a tension, a struggle between the body and the soul, because they both have their own things that they want, and the mind is kind of what makes the decision. Mind's kind of the arbiter between the soul and the body. So I think you're right. I think when we look at the lyrics under that light, I think it holds up that there is a distinction between mind and soul for Mumford and Sons.
Yeah.
But I think we should keep that in mind and probably talk more about it in Awake My Soul.
Yes, I'm getting ahead of myself.
All right, well, let's move on then to the next stanza. Alone in the wind and the rain you left me. It's getting dark, darling, too dark to see, and I'm on my knees and your faith in shreds it seems. So there's that idea of loneliness again, alone in the wind and the rain, and there's the storm again, which is King Lear again. I don't think it's a stretch to think that we're going back to King Lear in this song. I think that's pretty evident, because he was definitely left alone by his daughters He had a few people who were still faithful to him with him, but he almost didn't even really notice that they were there because he was so alone in that winter clarity, clouding his mind. It's getting dark, darling, too dark to see. So there's that idea of not being able to see anything coming back, of blindness, which just keeps on coming back in this album, especially with King Lear, with that blindness, and the blind man from I Gave You All that stuff. And I also just thought it was interesting in this line that Mumford and Sons uses the word darling, because it's not actually a common word for them to use. They don't use that many terms of endearment in their songs. You know, they're not the Hunts, which have a whole album called Darlin', Oh Darling. And they're not the Oh Hellos or anything like that. So for a real folksy band, they don't have a lot of songs that use terms of endearment like that. Probably because most of their songs are so much more abstract than your average folk band.
Yes.
They're much closer to something like T.S. Eliot than someone like John Denver.
Right.
Not to knock on John Denver. Love me some Colorado Rocky Mountain High.
Yeah, maybe because a lot of their songs aren't really focused on romantic relationships. I feel like those are the songs where you'll normally hear those terms of endearment.
Right.
Of course, they include things like that in their music, but there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, it's almost like romantic love is one dimension to most of their songs.
Right.
But there are several other dimensions as well. They're a cool band.
Yes, they are.
So the last line in this stanza, again, is, "And I'm on my knees, and your faith in shreds it seems." So there's that idea, or that theme of knees coming back. You know, we saw in White Blank Page, he asked, "Can you kneel before the king and say I'm clean?" That suggests to me that perhaps that's one of the things that points out that there's a spiritual dimension going on in this song, because the idea of being on your knees is, of course, reminiscent of prayer, of petition, of surrender, worship, any of those things. Not with haste. I was broke, I was on my knees, and you said yes as I said please. You know, anytime somebody is on their knees, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're praying, but like I said, with Mumford and Sons, there's always multiple dimensions to their songs. So that it seems to indicate, especially with how spiritual this song gets in a minute. Well, just in this line, he talks about faith.
Yes.
Your faith in shreds, it seems. So there are a couple different ways that I'm interpreting this line. The first one is, I'm on my knees, and your faith in shreds, it seems. So I'm kneeling before this other person, begging forgiveness because I wronged you, and now you don't trust me anymore, right? You don't have any faith in me, so I'm begging your forgiveness for something I did wrong, right? And that, definitely themes of betrayal and fault and effing it up that we've seen so far. So it's really, that interpretation feels pretty consonant with a lot of the rest of the album. But then there's also that question of, is being on your knees supposed to represent prayer more? And when he says your faith is in shreds, does that mean, is he talking about your faith in God as opposed to your faith in me, in man? Or is God on his knees supplicating us to return? Is it from the prophet Joel, I think? Return to me with all your heart. That the Lord has been known to plead with us to come back to him and accept him again when our faith is in shreds. So maybe there's some of that going on as well. If that's the case, then that's another connection with Winter Winds, where he was talking about the shame that set me off from the God that I once loved. So here, his faith is in shreds. He doesn't even really trust God anymore.
Yeah.
So that's that stanza. Any thoughts?
I think for me, I would imagine it being not God pleading, because I feel like there is that constant throughout, sprinkled throughout the album, this struggle of faith that he's going through. So I feel like it's him speaking about that struggle. But maybe not. It's hard to say. But that's just my hunt. That's my inclination to think that it's the former.
Gotcha.
I don't know.
Well, it could be not to just use this as a cop-out, but it could be that those several different interpretations are all valid.
True.
So yeah, maybe we'll look at that line again when we reach the end and see if we remind me to bring that up again after we get through the rest of the lines.
I think for me, I would imagine it being not God pleading, because I feel like there is that constant throughout, sprinkled throughout the album, this struggle of faith that he's going through. So I feel like it's him speaking about that struggle. But maybe not. It's hard to say. But that's just my hunt. That's my inclination to think that it's the former.
Gotcha.
I don't know.
Well, it could be not to just use this as a cop-out, but it could be that those several different interpretations are all valid.
True.
So yeah, maybe we'll look at that line again when we reach the end and see if we remind me to bring that up again after we get through the rest of the lines. So next stanza then is, corrupted by the simple sniff of riches blown, I know you have felt much more love than you've shown. I'm on my knees and the water creeps to my chest. So a lot going on in this stanza here. First of all, corrupted by the simple sniff of riches blown, which is just kind of a weird way of saying you smelled money and it ruined you. You got caught up in the chase for gold, right? Classic timeless story. Happens time and time again to people that they lose themselves because of that love for money. What's the song by the Oh-Hellos, Wishing Well? She says, I heard that dollar calling me, so I sought it in the city. That's just one example from another song. But this made me think of a line from Paul's first letter to Timothy, chapter 6, where he says, for the love of money is the root of all evils. Which is kind of an odd thing to say. It kind of confused me when I first heard it. It was like, really? Like, all evils is derived from that a love for money? But I think what he really means is that he's using money to represent anything that is of this world.
Like mammon.
Exactly. The world, the flesh, and the devil, right? So anytime if you love anything that's not God more than God, that's going to produce any sort of evil. Like, that's what produces all evil. Yeah. There's probably all sorts of scholarly exegetes who go more into detail about what St. Paul meant there, but that is not me, so I don't have the qualifications or the intellect to plumb the depths of St. Paul. Certainly not on this podcast episode. But basically, that's how I'm interpreting it here, is that he's saying the love for worldly things, the love for anything else other than God, that's the root of all evil. The Latin version of that line from Timothy is Radix malorum est cupiditas, which is just kind of fun to say. But the reason I bring that up is because it is the theme of the Pardoner's Tale, in Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, which I have right here in a lovely hardcover edition, which is actually, this is super fun. It has Old English on one page and modern English on the other page.
Nice.
So not Old English, Middle English. Beowulf will be Old English. This is, that other fur was quaint and all agone, and as it quaint it made a whistling, as dun this wette brandes in here brenning, etc. So it's kind of hard to read it nowadays, but you can, with a little bit of help, you can read the Middle English fairly easily.
That's handy.
It is. So it's the thing on the other page is a very direct translation. So it's not very poetical.
Chaucer.
It's no fear Chaucer. Yeah. It's not very poetic, not a whole lot of fun to read that just by itself, but as an aid for deciphering the Middle English, it's super helpful. Anyway, so I bring this up because one of the stories that Chaucer tells in the Canterbury Tales, the theme of it is radix malorum est cupiditas, that the love of money is the root of all evils. It's an entertaining story, largely because the person who is telling it, he likes to use that story in his preaching to convince the congregation that love of money is the root of all evil, and therefore they should give their money to him. And he's basically like a pious swindler. Super interesting, fun character. That line from 1 Timothy is used in a much more comedic sense in the Canterbury Tales than in Thistle and Weeds here. Mumford and Sons takes a much more serious approach to it. But that, Chaucer doesn't necessarily disbelieve it. If anything, I think the fact that the pardoner uses that line to get money from people is kind of proves St. Paul's point in a way.
Yeah.
But anyway, I wanted to bring that up because I've been reading Chaucer again, and Chaucer's super fun, and I wanted to talk about Chaucer on this podcast. So if you don't know what the Canterbury Tales is about, it was written in the 1300s. It's about a group of pilgrims traveling to Canterbury, and as they're journeying together, they decide that they'll all tell each other stories to pass the time. So it's a collection of all of those different stories that those characters tell each other along the way. So it's super fun. It's a great read. I encourage you to check it out. Maybe check out the video that I have of me reading the first page out loud, both in modern English and Middle English. So anyway, Chaucer's fun. But this whole theme of radix malorum est cupiditas, there's a lot more to it than just that line from 1 Timothy. Christ himself has numerous teachings about it in the Gospels. So there's Mark chapter 10, where the young man asks Christ what he has to do to inherit eternal life. He tells him that he has to sell all of his possessions, give them to the poor, and then come follow him. And then it says that the young man went away sad, for he had many possessions. So he'd been corrupted by that sniff of riches. He wasn't willing to put it aside for the sake of something that was more important. Matthew chapter 6, Christ has multiple teachings about the importance of almsgiving, storing up treasures in heaven. That's where he says you cannot serve both God and mammon. Luke chapter 16, he tells the parable of the rich man and the poor man named Lazarus, where the rich man lives a happy life on earth, but he doesn't have any love for anybody, so he spends eternity in hell, versus Lazarus, who lives a miserable life on earth, but a holy life, and gets to spend eternity in Abraham's bosom. So, moral of the story, don't love money too much. So Mumford is going to elaborate more on that as we go through this song here. The next line is, I know you have felt much more love than you've shown. So he's saying you weren't always this way. There was once a time where you actually had love in your heart, but now you just seem like a heartless person. So there's the implication there that if you haven't always been corrupted by the love of money, there's a chance that you can return to that condition, that you can be redeemed from it. And you better do it soon, because I'm on my knees, right, begging you to reject the worldly ways. And the water creeps to my chest, right? I feel like I'm going to be drowning soon in this water. And of course, water is reminiscent of the water in Tim's shell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cold is the water. It freezes your already cold mind. Already cold mind. So there's that coldness, right? The winter clarity clouding the mind, the water. So this speaker here, he's afraid that when this water, the water is creeping to his chest, and when it reaches his head, it's going to freeze his mind, and he's going to be lost. So whoever it is he's speaking to, and whoever this is that's speaking, they really need each other. And the speaker really needs this other person to turn away from worldly goods, because, I don't know, there's a line from another song on Babel that relates to this, but I forgot what it was. When you're so focused on one thing, you can't see the most important things in your life. I think it's in Lover's Eyes.
Probably.
But I don't remember how it goes. I'll put put the text at the bottom of the screen when I'm editing. Anyway, so that's that stanza, and then we finally come to the chorus. So, thoughts on what we've talked about so far?
I mean, I was talking about today in class. I was talking about almsgiving. We're studying the religion of Islam right now, world religions, and how almsgiving is one of the 5 pillars, and how giving away money, that sort of thing, removes obstacles between them and their God, Allah. And I was thinking about that today, more about how that happens for Christians as well. How just not being attached to money, how being able to give it away, how freeing that is. And just, again, this idea of surrender and giving up that attachment is just one thing, giving up attachments to all things, but starting with money, that I think so many of us are kind of focused on, making money, providing for ourselves, providing for our families, that sort of thing, securing our futures.
Which is all important work, but it's so easy to lose, to focus on that as the sole purpose.
Right, exactly. Especially when you do it at the expense of putting God first. That's not worth it. So, I mean, I guess I was just thinking about that, and the freedom that comes in not being attached to money, how that really does. That's such a, I think, because God knows our hearts. Once St. Paul said that, because he knows the human heart, and he knows that money is persuasive. And so
every man has a price, right?
Yeah. So, it's a good thing to reflect on.
It is. So we've talked a lot about the condition and the problem so far, and now with the chorus, we finally get to look at the solution. The solution is, but plant your hope with good seeds. Don't cover yourself with thistle and weeds. Which, like I said before, it's fairly straightforward, actually. It's the one part of the song that is straightforward. The rest of it is like, what the heck's going on here? But once you understand the rest of all the verses, and you see how they're about how important it is to turn away from worldly things, because you don't want to be consumed by the love for money, because it means that you can't see the others in your life, right? That's it. Lover's eyes, right? My eye's too bright. I can't see the others in my life.
Yes.
That was the line I was
That
trying to
is.
remember earlier.
Wow.
So that, which really applies here too, that it's so important to think about other people, right? And to consider the state of your own soul, to reflect, have I been corrupted by that love for money, by attachments to worldly things, so much so that my soul is numb, right? That I'm in this winter clarity that's clouding my mind. It's important to look at that. And all this imagery of, seeds and weeds and thistles and things is really reminiscent of the parable of the sower in the Gospels, which, let's go ahead and read that real quick. That same day Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea, and great crowds gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and sat there, and the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they had not much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell upon thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. And then a little later in the chapter, he explains the parable to his disciples. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in his heart. This is what was sown along the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is he who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a while, and when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately he falls away. As for what was sown among thorns, this is he who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the delight in riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. As for what was sown on good soil, this is he who hears the word and understands it. He indeed bears fruit and yields in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30. So that's the parable. That's Christ talking about planting seeds, which is the word of God, right? The good news of the kingdom. And that's what we want to have in our hearts, right? That's the cause of our hope. So plant that hope with good seeds. Otherwise, if it falls among the thistles or the weeds or the rocky ground, it's not going to last. It's not going to bear fruit. So he's talking here about how important it is to do that, to focus on those things. There's also another parable in that same chapter about the weeds among the wheat, which has some similar themes to it. So go look that up and read it if you want. I'm not going to read it now. But then, like I mentioned earlier, this imagery of growth, plant life, springtime is reminiscent of winter winds when he says, remember spring swaps snow for leaves. Because we have this same contrast where at the beginning of the song we have winter, and now at this point in the song we're talking about things growing. And this idea of things growing is really symbolic of the soul, the spiritual life, and how things grow out of deadness. There's also a passage in East of Eden by John Steinbeck, which we've introduced in multiple episodes, so I'm not going to introduce it again. But I just wanted to read this passage because the language sounded really similar when I was reading it, and I just thought it was interesting. So this is about Adam Trask after his wife abandons him, and describes the spiritual lethargy that he falls into, as well as the lethargy that his land falls into. So on the Trask place, Adam drew into himself, The unfinished house lay open to wind and rain, and the new floorboards buckled and warped with moisture. The laid-out vegetable gardens rioted with weeds. Adam seemed clothed in a viscosity that slowed his movements and held his thoughts down. He saw the world through gray water. Now and then his mind fought its way upward, and when the light broke in, it brought him only a sickness of the mind, and he retired into the grayness again. So just a lot of that imagery, really seems very similar to this song, talking about the water and, that the mind being clouded and the land itself being covered with weeds because he's not in a spiritual state where he's feeling up to taking care of that. Just all of that. So just another interesting connection between Mumford and Sons and John Steinbeck. You find those all the time when you really look for them. Some may accuse me of looking too hard for them, but, well, too bad. Let me know in the comments if you think that's the case. And then the last line in the chorus is rain down on me. So here the speaker, I think, is the same, but the person he's addressing has changed. He's no longer addressing another person, telling that person to plant your hope with good seeds, but now he's talking to God and saying, rain down on me, rain your graces down on me. Give life to these seeds that I've planted. And of course, if he's talking about grace, there's graces all over the album, right? Roll away your stone, little lion man, and it'll come up again in Dust Bowl Dancing after the storm. All right, let's jump into the next verse then. Look over your hills and be still. The sky above us shoots to kill. Rain down on me. So, look over your hills and be still. That, on a literal level, it's saying, look off in the distance. That storm is coming. It's getting worse. And be still means, I guess, take it in, recognize what it means, reflect on that. Look at the signs of the times, basically. And so the image of the hills, though, is interesting because it's going to come up again in Dust Bowl Dance, right? Place all my trust at the foot of this hill, and also in After the Storm, get over your hill and see what you find there. So the image of the hill means several different things. I think it means like the horizon, right? What's off in the distance at the end of your journey. But then it also, I think especially in Dust Bowl Dance, where he says, I place all my trust at the foot of this hill, I think it references the hill of the cross. So that's just, I guess we'll talk more about that in Dust Bowl Dance, but that's a connection I found interesting. Also, just that idea of the storm rolling over the hills made me think of the song Pompeii by Bastille. Gray clouds roll over the hills, bringing darkness from above. But if you close your eyes, etc., etc. Fun song, super catchy. It'll get stuck in your head like nobody's business.
Very true.
So look over your hills and be still. Look at that storm. The sky above us shoots to kill. So very much there's this idea of that tension between heaven and earth, right? That storm is here like to bring judgment on the earth, basically. And it means business, right? It shoots to kill. It's shooting out lightning. It's pouring down rain, and it's here to ruin the people who aren't ready for it. And the people who aren't ready for it are the people who have been corrupted by the simple sniff of riches blown. The people who are too attached to this world. The people whose minds are clouded, who are being torn apart at the seams like King Lear. They're not ready for this storm. So it's a really bad scenario that we're finding ourselves in. But then at the end of that stanza, he repeats the whole rain down on me. So in this desperate situation, he's turning to the Lord and asking him to send down his grace so that this storm that's pouring down rain on the earth won't be the death of him, but actually is salvation, because it will water those seeds that he's planted. There are numerous prayers to pray before receiving Holy Communion written by the saints that talk about how they're asking the Lord that this communion that I'm to receive will not be for me judgment and condemnation, but forgiveness and salvation, right? So that's the same idea, is that for those whose hearts are disposed to it, this thing that is happening is going to save them. But for those who aren't ready for it, it'll destroy them. So whether it's Holy Communion or a storm, or a spiritual storm, or even the end times, right? Those who aren't predisposed, those who didn't live their lives well, they'll be destroyed. But the people who persevered, who weren't too attached to worldly things, they will be taken to eternal life. So I will hold on hope that I'm going to keep hoping that will be me, that I'll be one of those people who planted his hope with good seeds, didn't cover himself with thistle and weeds, received the graces that were being poured down on him, and therefore is, ready to meet my Maker. Because, as the next lines say, I begged you to hear me, there's more than flesh and bones. So there's that image of petition again, right? He was saying, I'm on my knees earlier. Now he's saying, I begged you to hear me. So he's referring to when he was on his knees speaking to this other person. There's more than flesh and bones. Man is not just a body. Man is also a soul. And so these are the things that you need to focus on. For what will it profit a man if he gain the whole world but lose his life and lose his soul, suffer eternal damnation? That's Matthew chapter 16, once again, by the way. Or Luke chapter 12, the parable of the rich fool, who his fields yield a harvest that he doesn't even know what to do with. He's like, what am I going to do now? Well, I'll tear down my barns, build bigger ones, store up all of this, and eat, drink, and be merry, for I have plenty to, see me through for years to come. But then the Lord says to his heart, you fool, this night your life will be demanded of you. And the things that you've prepared in this world, to whom will they go? What's the point of those things? So there's more than flesh and bones. And that's why I begged you to hear me. This person is so desperate in speaking to this other person, because he knows that this other person needs to recognize the reality of the soul. And then he says, let the dead bury the dead, which is a reference to Luke chapter 9, where Christ says to somebody, follow me. The man says, Lord, let me go first and bury my father, which doesn't mean that the man's father is dead. It means the man is saying, let me take care of my father until he dies, and then after that, I'll come and follow you. But Christ says, let the dead bury their dead. As for you, follow me. So what Christ is saying is that there are plenty of people who are attending to the things of this world, to worldly affairs. But as for you, put those things aside, seek out what is above, what is, more important, more spiritual. That's what I'm calling you to do. Let the dead bury the dead, they will come out in droves, right? There are just droves of people everywhere attending to worldly things. Let them do those things, but you need to focus on the spiritual world. Not to say that you shouldn't try to help those other people, but you need to recognize that the important areas to help people in are the spiritual ones. But take the spade from my hand and fill in the holes you've made. You've created problems for yourself. You've dug yourself into a pit, but I'm giving you the shovel that you can use to fill it in again. Because you told me that I would find a hole within the fragile substance of my soul. That's Roll Away Your Stone earlier on this album. You've dug yourself into a pit, but I'm here to help you get out of it. You can fill it in, fill in those holes that you've made, fixing all the problems that you made in your own head, like in Little Lion Man. And then the chorus is repeated. Plant your hope with good seeds. Don't cover yourself with thistle and weeds. Rain down on me.
Mm-hmm.
So, in some ways, this is kind of one of the most, I guess you could say, evangelistic songs of Mumford and Sons. It almost reads like a sermon, honestly. Yeah. Well, I think it's because it borrows so much language from Christ's parables. Yeah, it's basically a musical retelling of Christ's parables about riches and preparing your soul for the kingdom.
Yeah. And it's interesting that this is the scary song. Almost like putting the fear of God in us or something.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Which that's another line from Mumford and Sons, right? The Wild.
Oh,
Puts the fear of God in me.
Yes.
All right. What was that line that we wanted to go back to look at?
About begging on his knees.
On my knees and your faith in shreds, it seems.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm still kind of unclear about that because I'm still not entirely clear who all the different speakers are in the song. Maybe it changes a lot, but it just, I don't know, it seems to be, it's so much in second person.
Yeah.
That I think that's probably one of the other reasons that it kind of reads like a sermon or like a parable, because he's talking to somebody the whole time, telling them about these things. He's not so much revealing to the audience what's going on in his own soul as kind of revealing what's going on in our souls to ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't know. I forget what was your contention about it? That you thought that it wasn't so much talking about faith in God as...
Or that it was God the one on his knees.
Oh, right.
I suppose, I guess...
Because it mirrors that line later, I beg you to hear me, there's more than flesh and bones.
Yeah, I suppose maybe it's the image of God. I mean, you mentioned the scripture passage where God is speaking, return to me, kind of pleading with us. But maybe just the image of God in this posture of prayer to us maybe is a little unsettling.
It's kind of a bold image.
Yeah.
It's not really one that you see anywhere. Right.
Not to say God would go to the ends of the earth. He would leave all the 99 to find the one kind of thing. So I don't think there's it's beyond God. It's just not something I think of God doing.
But we do often see Christ pleading with people in the Gospels, right? Especially, when he, like in the instance where he says, let the dead bury their dead, he's going around to these different people and saying, follow me. And that's a real, he's really like putting himself out there and, opening himself up to the possibility of rejection, but also giving these, opening up his heart and saying, come with me, join me, follow me, take my yoke upon you. It's just kind of a radical thing for God to be doing. Although it's very much in character, because this is literally a God who came down to earth and became a human being so that he could die for us. So, it's very much on brand.
Right. Yeah, I mean, God is pretty radical.
But yeah, that image of him being on his knees before us is really not something that you see anywhere.
Right. Yeah, because that's a posture of prayer. It says, well, God doesn't, that's, a posture of worship. That's almost like God is. Right. But he's not.
But being on your knees can mean
multiple things,
different things, right? So it can mean prayer, or it can mean just pleading.
Yeah, I mean, God is so vulnerable with us,
Mhm.
you know, He would become small like a baby. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
yeah.
I love how, like, with every episode, this podcast becomes more and more like a Sunday school. You know, I knew going into it that there was a lot of spiritual symbolism in this album, but honestly, like, it's becoming even more and more than I saw it coming, which, like, I don't know. So, Mumford and Sons does not describe themselves as religious, right? They consider themselves spiritual rather than religious, which, that being what it is, take it for what it is. A lot of people have been burned by experiences with religious people, and, everybody's on their own journey and has their own, stuff to work out. But, they really do seem to be coming from a place of deep, profound spiritual reflection, which is just really interesting. So I think it's, maybe they felt like it was something they had to do, right? That they really wanted to make sure they weren't marketing themselves as Christian musicians, because honestly, you get so pigeonholed into that so easily. And, personally, I'm not a fan of a lot of religious music that comes out nowadays. Some of it's pretty good, but, like, on the whole, a lot of it is just not as good of music as some other music. Then again, there's a lot of trash in pop music also, and anyway, I'm rambling now, but I can see why they didn't want to be considered a religious band, but maybe there is a little more to their religious and spiritual inclinations. At least maybe there was at the time that they wrote these songs. Who knows where they're at now? And ultimately, who can know what's going on in their souls other than God himself? But I hope they're planting their hope with good seeds.
Yes, me too.
Because I hope to meet them at the Delta.
Me too.
Yeah. All right, well, I guess it's time to talk about what we've learned today. So, it's pretty easy to sum up. Would be plant your hope with good seeds. Don't cover yourself with thistle and weeds. We've been through quite the emotional roller coaster on this album so far. I think it's been a few episodes since we've sort of like tracked that progression. So, we saw in Sigh No More, we had that promise, right? That love will not betray you, dismay, or enslave you. It'll set you free, be more like the man you were made to be. And then we've seen the journey to find the fulfillment of that promise throughout the course of the album. So he sets off on the journey in the cave. He falls in winter winds. He really dives into his own darkness in Roll Away Your Stone and emerges victorious. And only to be betrayed in White Blank Page, to wallow in that betrayal, and I gave you all, to turn bitter and self-flagellating in Little Lion Man, and then finally with Tim Shell, things started to calm down a little bit, and we got that insight into human nature about how important choice is, and how at the end of the day, man can choose good or man can choose evil. This song really elaborates more on that, about that choice between the world and the spirit, right? And that's really setting up for what's going to happen in the next song with meeting the Maker. So it's been quite the journey so far. It's been super duper interesting. Met a lot of really fascinating authors along the way, like Steinbeck and Shakespeare and Chesterton and Chaucer and John Paul II,
St. Paul.
St. Paul. Some of these authors have been unfairly squished into the the songs by yours truly, but others have been very clear references from Mumford and Sons. But I think they've all helped us to sort of understand it all a little better and go a little deeper into what Mumford and Sons is saying here.
Yep.
So 3 songs left.
Whoa.
Until we hit the end of this album, and then we'll have to figure out exactly what it's going to look like going forward. I can't wait to get into some of these other albums, and also work on some other Mumford and Sons projects, as well as some other projects related to other works of art, other books and TV shows and films and things. So this has been super great so far, and this is just the beginning. Stay tuned. There is so much more to come with Mumford and Sons and lots of other things. So, closing thoughts from Bridget?
I don't know if you heard about the banjo player in Mumford and Sons.
Marshall Winston?
Yeah, Marshall Winston.
How he got...
This is nothing profound. It's just current events.
Yeah, he tweeted a congratulations to some guy who wrote a controversial book.
Yes.
And then
he said he's taking time away. Taking time away from the band.
Seriously? I didn't see that.
Yes, because he said the work that was written was an important work. Something about Antifa.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know that cancel culture is still alive and well, and that it's, messing with
he read a
Mumford
book,
and Sons.
And then he got in trouble for it. Now he's taking time away from the band.
Oh, man.
That's what was going through my head. Just the sadness of that.
Yeah, no, that's disappointing. I hadn't heard he was taking time away from the band.
Yeah, who knows how long that will be. Maybe that's just like a week or something, but...
Yeah, I
guess he maybe offended bandmates as well by promoting that book, so...
Possibly. Who knows, it's such a... At the end of the day, it can be a pretty volatile relationship, right? To be band members together.
Yes.
There's all sorts of drama that can go on, and nobody's perfect, certainly not musicians. Yeah. But
Winston, don't apologize for reading a book.
I do hope that, I hope that they do all stick together for many years to come.
Me too.
But, if they don't, who knows? Maybe it'll be for the best, and maybe they'll go their separate ways. Who knows? Who knows? We are, they have released a new album every 3 years since they started. So that would be this year. Who knows? I don't know if things got thrown off because of COVID, or, who knows if they'll stick to, if they were even planning on sticking to that pattern, because they are a band that likes to shake things up a bit. So who knows?
Yeah.
They went radical and did 14 songs on their last album instead of 12. So who knows what they could do? It could be 7 years before the next Mumford and Sons album.
Oh, well, we'll be waiting.
Yes, we will. And in the meantime,
I will wait.
I will wait for you. Yes. Okay. Well, I think we've talked a long time on this, maybe too long, but who cares? So we'll see you guys next week for Awake My Soul.
Woo-hoo.
And until next time, this is T.S. Russell and Bridget Gamboni reminding you to sign no more.